Too beautiful for words. Carol Manson. So good to hear you again. And Bush, we welcome you. Carol's husband, Bush, is here today celebrating a birthday. Yeah, so happy birthday to you. Yeah. Oh, gosh, I am so grateful for this place. Whew. I seem to be softening. I don't know what's happening to me, but of late, my feelings are close to the surface. And I'm not fighting it. I'm not trying to judge it. And it's just the flow that I'm in right now. And it's kind of nice. It's actually good for my relationships, especially with my wife and people who like that softer side. Anyway, we are starting a series today on our core values. As a community, we have established core values, which is a very important practice. It is to say, what are those principles, those ideals that we have as a community that define us when we are at our very best? And it's not just to come up with those through a collaborative, collective process. So often, we'll sit down and we'll write our personal mission statement, or we'll come up with our values for life. They go on a little notebook somewhere, or they go up on a wall somewhere, and then we sort of forget about them and we don't revisit them. What I wanted to do today, to begin a series, to take a week for each of those 5 values, to really unpack them, to really understand their significance, and more importantly, to see how they can show up in our community, and very more specifically, how they can show up in our lives. Because if they are to be anything for us, they must be practical. They must be something that doesn't sit in some lofty place in our mind or in consciousness, or so far away from our everyday life that we can't envision ourselves actually living them. So really want to bring those values into reality, into accessibility. So another thing we could say about values is that when a community goes through its tough times, its values could be the very thing that sustains it, that gives it its true north. It's that which you would not deviate from. They're not negotiable. And it's because those values are there to sort of guide you when the waters are rough, that you have something to keep you on track, to keep you focused on your vision and your mission by employing those values. So they're like plumb lines, if you will, to keep ourselves in alignment with the vertical. The vertical meaning our connection with the highest and best that is in us, in God, whatever's your favorite name for your higher power this week. But we are here to bring those values to embody those values. And I was not here when you created those. But interestingly enough, when I looked at your website, when I was considering this position, and I read those values, and I read your mission statement, I read your vision statement, I thought, I am down with all of these values, and I am completely in alignment with this mission and vision. So it feels like, in some sense, at least, from distance, I was with you in the creation, and I can certainly own those and feel those as part of me. So with that introduction, let's begin with our first value today, which is love. I was saying to Denise, I said, well, that isn't too much of a topic for one talk, is it? So of course it is. Love is such there's so many ways of looking at love and all of its iterations, and it's not my job, as A Course in Miracles says, to define what love is, but it is to understand how we might experience more in our life. And so we're going to look at that today with a couple of different little nuances and angles. So the love value that we have as a community is love. We recognize, honor, and embrace the divine nature in all. Could we put that up? Put number 1 on, and we'll flash it up here on the screen. We recognize, honor, and embrace the divine nature in all. So just by the very statement of that, what we understand is that love is not just some kind of an ethical imperative. A lot of people think that love is something that sits apart from us that we're trying to get. If we're being honest, we oftentimes feel like love has left the building. We're not experiencing the fullness of love. And we would think that love should come to us. We want love in our life, like I'm open to love. I want love to come. And that usually references or suggests that there's some kind of a situation that needs to happen. Some kind of form needs to take place in our life. Some kind of a shift needs to happen so that we can experience love. But by this definition that you've established as a community, what we're saying is that this love is part of our divine nature. In other words, love could not be any more of what you already are. Love is, like Oprah always used to say, love is what you be, honey. Love is what you be. Your very essence, your nature is love itself. And that becomes the paradox of our seeking for love. Because it's like, the proverbial fish looking for the water. You're in it, you're so close to it. It's, Jesus said, closer than hands and feet and even your breath. And yet we seek out here. And of course, when I seek outside of myself for that which is within me, am I frustrated? Yes, I am frustrated only again and again and only 100% of the time. So the idea that we're looking at today is, how do we remove the tendency to look outside of ourselves? Because that would seem to be the pivot point for our experience of this love. If it's part of our nature, then the work is not to get God or some mysterious notion of love to come to us, but it is to remove the barrier, that which we have, I would say, and most spiritual teachers would say, we have constructed a barrier to that which is already present. And now this is not an actual barrier. It doesn't have any physicality to it. It doesn't have any reality to it. But it does have an experiential reality to it. And so if we want the experience of what's real, the experience of the divine, then we have to work at the level of what appears to be in the way. And so that sometimes is called by lots of different names, but the one that's most familiar to many of us is ego. And there's lots of definitions for ego, but the one that works best for this conversation is the ego is the idea of a separated self, of a separate self. You're separate from God, you're separate from other people, you're separate from life, you're separate from love. And that has a sense of identity, that's who I am. And I can look at myself right now, if I'm in my surface mind, and I can say, clearly, I am a separate being. I have my own thoughts right now, I have my own physicality, and that, where my skin ends, anything outside of this is other, and everything inside is me. So we have these physical representations of separateness in our life that, so we come by this honestly. But the spiritual work has never been about working out here, has it? So if we're trying to find some way to join with the appearances of separation, we will be frustrated again. So our work is not to join with other people at the physical level, although we have certain activities in which we are preferable for that, and I won't go into that today. You can relax. I'm not going into that today. There will be a Sunday for that, but not this Sunday. So we would love to have that yoga experience. We would love to have that union experience. And we think that if we make love, for example, how are we doing so far? Everybody okay? If we make love, then somehow we'll have the experience of love. But that is not it. That is what it is, but it isn't the joining of souls, of spirit, of life. The kind of love that you and I are looking for cannot be created or destroyed. So we can't make love, but we can experience it. It's gotten really quiet in here, have you noticed? Should be some tee-hee-hee, but there's not even that. So, okay. All right, you're all mature adults. I guess I'm the one that's saying that inside. Tee-hee-hee. Okay, you're good. I'm not. All right, so if what we want is this experience of love, and we don't seem to be having it, then there is this separation that has taken place. And There's been some beautiful poetry by Rumi and Hafiz and people like that. I'm going to share a little bit with that today that really asks us to seek deeper than what appearances would say to us. And so Hafiz's words on this from, I don't know where it's from, one of his poems, he says this, he says, ask the friend for love. Now, friend is higher power. Ask the friend for love. Ask him again. For I have heard that whatever one's heart prays for the most, that's what one gets. Whatever one prays for the most, that's what one gets. Jesus talked about this also. He said, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will also be. In other words, whatever really matters to you, whatever you really value in your heart will contain the same energy. So if it is that you really want love, if that's really what you want, and you're not willing to settle for the substitute, if you're not willing to settle for the approximations of love, which are all the ways that we think, which would be if people would just treat me a certain way. Do we know this one? If people would recognize me, if people would accept me just the way I am, if people would laugh at my jokes. We all have our versions of how we feel loved and accepted. But that is a substitute. Hear me now. These teachings are really high. That's why we put the monitors up here, so you could see how high I am right now. This is really high teaching, but it is the only way out of the suffering that you and I have if we settle for substitutes. Now, you don't have to settle. You don't have to give up the substitutes. You can continue to do that. It's like you don't have to change anything unless you're motivated to do so. And sometimes, at some point in our life, all of us are like that prodigal, right? Where we come to the end of this way of living our life, and where we say, I'm not going to live this way anymore. I want the real deal. I want the real thing. I don't want just some, bauble or whatever of love. I want the real thing. I want the experience. I want that sense that it's embedded in me. It's part of who I am. And the way we do that is we ask the friend. We ask the Spirit. We ask for love. We ask again and again. And what we get from the highest part of us will not deter us from the truth. But sometimes we have to ask, we have to get down on our knees. we have to give up these misguided notions that have kept us and separated us from the real deal. And that's not easy. It's not easy. It's probably one of the hardest things for us to do, but it also gives us the greatest thing that there could possibly be in our life, and that is the experience of this love that does not rise and fall. It's constant, and it is our completion. So it has to do sometimes with intention and attention. Because everything we're doing is some way a training in how to pay attention. And how we pay attention can determine whether we free our heart and open it up to love or move us away from it. Because, it's very easy for us to pay attention to the things that are in our face, right? If you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off, I had this experience this week. It's happened to every one of us. It probably happens to every one of us once a week if we're driving. And we can pay attention to what happened, and we can particularly pay attention to what somebody did. So here was my experience this week. I'm not enlightened, but I had a good moment, so I'm sharing the good one with you. I'll also share the bad ones with you. But so I'm driving along, and I'm coming down Mission Street, and where Mission crosses De La Vina, and it goes into one lane. So I was in the right-hand lane, but I was going to be going straight, and so I was going to get to that merge point across De La Vina. So there was a car, as we were crossing De La Vina, there was a car that was behind me. And as we got across the street, this car just zoomed ahead and got in front of me and just narrowly missed my front of my car. And so now normally in a situation like that, I would be triggered, and my first response right after I felt the jolt of that incident would be to think of what that other person just did to me. But by the grace of God, or whatever happened in that moment, maybe this is something that's happening in me these days, I became aware of what was happening in me. I became aware of what was happening in me. And I did not go to think of that other person. And I said, oh, so I was aware. I said, well, what am I? Okay, I'm feeling afraid. I'm feeling afraid. And my heart was beating, so I could notice my heart was beating a little bit more. And I was concerned, and I was frustrated, and I was angry. But this was all with what I was paying attention to was what my experience was. Now, the other way of doing it would be that I would take what that other person did, which was basically cutting me off, and I would take that personally. He did that, and that was against me. Which brings up a whole other set of reactions, such as I'm a victim, that people don't respect me, people take advantage of me, then all kinds of judgments around him, and his nature. And that didn't happen in this instance. So what I want you to know is as I was sitting there being with this experience, and I was just breathing with it, just noticing my own experience, and taking my feelings very personally. Not what he had done personally, but my own experience took that personally. Because see, that's the domain that I have complete control over. You understand? This is the domain you have control over. You don't have control over what someone's going to do out there on the highway today of life. You don't have control. But you do have control over this domain. So this was an enlightening moment for me. Because as I sat with my feelings, and gradually they subsided, the heartbeat returned to its normal rhythm, and the frustration and the anger just sort of dissolved down to neutral. It was about 2 blocks to do that. Then I did think about the other person, and I didn't have any anger towards that person. Because see, the anger would come from what he did to me. I'm taking it personally. But he just did what he did. What if he was completely unconscious? Now, I'm making up excuses for him. But don't we like to make stories up that's about us, what someone else is doing? Now, there could be a whole litany of reasons why that person drove the way they did. It could have been someone on the way to an emergency. Could have been someone completely unconscious of my car being there. But because I worked it out at this level, this domain, and my attention and intention was here, then I didn't have to go against him. I didn't have to judge. I didn't have to resent. I didn't have to make him an enemy, and I didn't have to feel like a victim. Now, to me, that's a great victory. Now, this is a small thing, but you know that if I can do this, Jesus said, if you're faithful in small things, you can be faithful in great things. So we begin wherever we can begin. We do whatever we can. We take on the challenge of whatever challenge is manageable where we are in life. And for me, it's like, that is a very exciting idea. Because since I had not ever done that before, you understand what I'm saying? Since that was a breakthrough in my reactivity and where my attention was contained to my own experience, to me it said that I have capacity in that area. Do you understand? So you have capacity in the area, but you'll never know it unless you explore it. If you don't explore it, if you don't test it, if you don't say, ask the friend for love in those moments. Ask to see it from a higher perspective. And that had anything to do with the other person yet. See, I haven't even got there to the idea that the other person's a child of God and they're perfect and loving and all that. We haven't got there yet. Because you know what? That might be too much to ask when someone just does something like that. To go, oh yeah, well, he's just a beautiful, innocent child of God, and I see the Christ in him, and his Buddha nature is he's just forgotten who he is, and I just bless him and namaste him all day long. It's like, no, not there yet. When I have that experience, I'll share that with you. This week, this is what I can do. So whatever we can do, when we can ask the friend, if we can ask our higher power, when we can access that part of us that can see a little differently and say, bring that forward in this instance. Let that color my world instead of those judgments, instead of that reactivity that just fires off. Because I know where that leads. We know about road rage and other versions of that in our life. We know that if we see ourselves as a victim, other people are victimizers, the world is an unfriendly place, then we have to change other people in order for us to be okay. And if we have to change other people for the world to be okay for us, we're all in trouble. And guess what? We might just be going to war again and again and yet one more time. Because when the problem is outside of ourselves and the problem is in someone else or in something else, it's a call to action that has nothing to do with you or me. So everything that we do, what we pay attention to will determine our experience. If we can pay attention to the experience that we're having and allow ourselves to be in the domain of our own experience, then we are also in the domain of where love lives. See? So when I stay inside of myself, when there is a reaction in me and my tendency is to go out and to deal with it by some blame or judgment, then not only am I taking myself away from the domain that I can handle emotionally, but I also am leaving the domain of my God self, my divine self, my divine nature. And how am I ever going to find peace if I leave the sanctuary where peace is? How am I ever going to find love if I leave the sanctuary of love? If I go out of myself and expect someone else to somehow do something just the right way so that I can feel loved inside. If I do feel love inside, it's only because something fired off inside of me. Some reactivity came off in me. If you come up to me and say, "Oh, that's a beautiful shirt you're wearing," and then I feel, "Oh, thank you," and I just take that in, it's not because you said I have a beautiful shirt. By the way, it is. So you don't have to say it. But how I take that in, then I could line up with, I need approval, I need people to like me, I need people to think I'm okay. See, all that happens inside of me. So that's such a big thing to lay upon others, isn't it? To say nothing of what it asks of you. It asks of you to do the impossible. It asks you, and I think I read this a few weeks ago, about asking life to just show up exactly the way we want it to show up so that we're happy all the time. That's basically what we're saying if we're living in that old thought system. And so when we understand that our value here as a community is love, then we raise the bar of our expectation. And it actually says that we are responsible to find the love that we are seeking. We are responsible to find it. And we are responsible to find it not because it's missing or it's hidden, but because it exists in our very nature. And because it exists in our very nature, we are all capable of finding it. And then, yes, there is the extension of that understanding to others. That I can look at you, and I can look at you, and I can look at you, and I can say, I see the divine in you. I know it's there. And usually I can see that the best when I'm seeing it in myself, right? It was much easier for me to think of that individual who drove off as, maybe he's having a bad day, and he's a good person, he's an honest person, he's a loving person. I'm sure he's got his good days and his bad days, just like I do. And I was able to see that because I'd already come to peace with myself. I didn't put the problem outside of myself, so he didn't become the problem. Now, of course, this is not saying if he was driving recklessly and he did endanger me in some way, and he was within his conscious awareness, that wouldn't be something that should be corrected. And if a police officer just happened to be going by and saw that and wanted to pull him over and bring that to his attention, I would be okay with that. But not out of resentment. Not out of resentment. But out of the notion that, yes, we still need rules. We still need, we still have to live. And we don't want to live in chaos, and we don't want to live in reckless disregard for each other's well-being. That's all well and good, but what happens inside of us is what we're talking about today. And that's where you and I have this control. That's where we have dominion over this world. This is the dominion that God gave us, not dominion over this world out here, which we translated to thinking we could do whatever the heck we wanted with this world out here, because we've got dominion over the world and the animals and the plants and the land and the seas. But that's not the dominion that God gave us. God gave us dominion over what God shares with us, which is this nature, this divine nature. And we have dominion over it, not because it's some power that came to us apart from our nature. It came with our nature. It is our nature to have dominion. And it's the only dominion that you and I really have. It's the only power that you and I have. And it's, when I say only, it's the greatest power there is. Think about it. What could be greater in your life than if you had the power of love within your control? The power of love within your dominion. What could be greater? Everything that you and I have sought in our life, every goal that we have gone after, is some version of knowing that we are okay. That we have this experience of feeling loved and fulfilled and whole and complete. And that all of that comes with this nature. And so we have the greatest power within us to feel the way we really want to feel. And it's within us. And you know this is true, even if you can't quite grok it for yourself in this particular moment because you're dealing with a particular situation. You know people who have gone through amazingly difficult circumstances and have found a way to peace, right? Or have been dealt the most devastating, violent acts and have found a way to forgive and even to love. Now that would not be possible if it had to be done out here, would it? It's only possible because of the power of love that they have within themselves and that they were able to tap into that. These people who have had their whole family slaughtered. I mean, it's just incomprehensible that people would find a way to forgive and to love again. This is what the masters teach. This is what Jesus taught. And he said, you know, you love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Yeah, but the really big one, folks, the one that's in front of you in every given moment is love your neighbor as yourself. That's the continual reminder of the divine that is within you, or the blocks to the divine that are within you. And we get to choose in every given moment. And I'm just grateful for every moment where I see that I even have a choice. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes we don't see that we have a choice. Something happens and we just see there's one way to deal with this. There's one reaction and oh, so justified. But in those moments of grace, those moments of clarity, those moments of awareness, when something happens, something triggers you, and you see it like this, and you know that this road leads to suffering and anger, retribution, victimhood, and this road, oh, so quiet and unassuming, whispers, do you want to be at peace? Do you want to have love? Are you ready for that? And you choose this one. And you let go of this one. That's the one. That's the one we want. That's the love we want. We call off the search for love. That doesn't mean you don't have relationship conversations with people that are in your life. You must. Denise and I are in conversation all the time. And we ask for what we want. We're willing to hear no. And the reason we're willing to hear no is if we're not, then it's a demand, number one. And number two, we have the capacity within ourselves to meet our own needs. So if Denise is doing something that bothers me, I'm going to tell her. And she will tell me. And there'll be a request, like it'll be, we follow the NVC language. So when you did this, so here's an example. So I walk in to the house, and Denise is reading a magazine in the living room. So I walk in the house, close the door, start walking across the living room, and I look up at Denise, and I'm looking at her and waving, and she doesn't look up. No, I could have said hello and got her attention, but no. See, there's that little wounded boy, right? Wants to be acknowledged when I walk in the room. Hey, look, I'm here. Did you miss me? You know? And she's reading a magazine, whatever. So later on, I have a conversation with her. I said, you know, when I walked in the house today and you didn't look up, you didn't say hello, you didn't acknowledge me in any way, I felt kind of hurt, I felt disregarded, and I really need to be acknowledged, when I walk in, if you haven't seen me for a while. So she feeds back to me, okay, so she hears exactly what I said, so you felt, you felt like you felt hurt, and you felt, you didn't feel acknowledged, and you need acknowledgement, and okay, yeah, that's great and good. And my request is to her, so when I walk in, if you would just look up for a moment, just go, hi, and go back to reading, I'm good with that. So can you do that? She said, yeah, if I'm awake, if I'm aware. You could say, no, she didn't say it. But we have that conversation. Now, she says to that, yes, I'm glad to do that. But if she said to me, and this happens in other situations, she says, I'm not willing to do that. I hear you, I get it, but I'm just not willing to do that. So that's when the rubber meets the road, right? Because then you remember, the teaching, the love that I'm looking for, the respect that I'm looking for, the acknowledgement that I'm looking for is where? It's in me. So if someone out here, which is a approximation of love, does not give me what I want, then I could resent that person, couldn't I? And I could hammer away at them until they give me what I want. I could withhold my love from them. We could have the whole silent treatment. You know how we work this thing. And I could be mean to that person. I could play out this whole thing. And I've done that. But what I'm trying to do these days is go, okay, where can I get that respect? Where can I get that sense of wholeness, that acknowledgement? It's within me. And that becomes my growing edge. That becomes an opportunity for me to look the only place where it's ever going to be there 100% of the time. And that's how we dance in relationship. And sometimes it works really well, and sometimes it doesn't. But you're only in a relationship with one person. And you know who that person is? Yourself. Let's close with this. Did I bring it with me? Maybe I didn't. It was a good idea then, but apparently I canceled it. There's a story that Rumi tells. A friend knocks on the door, and the man inside says, "Who is it?" And the friend says, "It is I." The man inside says, "Go away." So the friend goes away, and he spends a year in inner searching and seeking and exploring and growing and maturing, what we're all doing. Comes back a year later and knocks on the door. The voice inside says, "Who's there?" And the friend says, "It is you." And he opens the door and he says, "Come in. There was never room in here for two eyes. Two eyes." And that's the work. Is there's only one of us. And that's why, and that's how we can experience this love. Because there isn't one that has it and one that doesn't, and one withholding it from the other. It's that there is only one. And the one that we're talking about is a spiritual one, which will be part of our other core values we'll be talking about. But the love that we're looking for is integrated into all of us in its fullness. There's no little bit of love in this person that I want, and then another little love from that person that I want. There is this love, and we are all it in expression, but with varying degrees of awareness. And so my job is not to make you more aware of my need for love, other than at the very human level, which is fine, but it is for me to grow. If I am to grow, it's for me to become aware of the more love that is within me and available to me in every given moment. And then I have what I've been looking for all along. Amen? Amen. Amen. Good. All right. So that's number one. But I want to do something really sweet today, which is it came up at our visioning retreat. And we decided as we were doing our core values that we wanted to extend these values, as I was saying, into the community. So beyond the fact that we hold these to be values that we all are excited about as a community, it's so important that we express them and we recognize people. So I have 3 rocks up here that have been painted, and they have the word love on them. And so I want to give them out, 2 of them in this room, and to 2 people. So the first one I want to give to, and these are people who I have observed, and of course there's many more, but these are people that came to my mind very quickly, who I think have expressed love beautifully in this community. So the first one is for Shirley Campbell. So Shirley, this was for you. And Shirley has been here. How long have you been in this community?
Well, I've been here 80 plus years.
80 plus years in Unity of Sin.
I was here as a child, and I am so grateful because there were a lot of things. As a child, you were so open, and so there were a lot of things. I was open and receptive to what was here for me, and it has been love from that time until now.
And that so shines through. Anybody who could stay in one community, a spiritual community, for 8 decades has had to tap into that love time and time again. So I just honor that in you. And also I want to give the second rock to Helen Zabel. Where are you, Helen? In the back, she's greeting today. Helen, I've seen this demonstrated in you time and time again in my 9 months here. And thank you for the love that you share and how you give witness to that quality here in our community. So good. So we're going to do this every week. Now, the instruction is that you hold this rock for 1 week, and then you pass it on to someone else that you see in the community that's expressing this value. And then we'll just keep doing that. And we're going to have one made that we'll just keep. We're creating a little bit of a sand tray, like an altar that'll be up here all the time, every Sunday. And so we'll keep these rocks up here as reminders, but then you could come up and you could say, you know, I just saw someone expressing love, and I'm going to take a rock and I'm going to present it to them. So this will be an ongoing activity where we keep this alive 365, okay?